Hi, this is Grace Quantock, and we are here with another Trailblazer interview. Today, the Trailblazer we are excitedly talking to is Michelle Nicolaisen. Hi, she is a writer who lives in Austin, Texas, and she's been freelancing for most of her adult life. She writes about how to live well and not lose your mind when you are a freelancer. She provides writing and blogging and social media marketing services, and serially and seriously publishing a novel. She has also launched an amazing Kickstarter, the Freelance Planner, which helps you to track your income, client projects, tasks, and everything else in one planner. So you basically earn more and stress less. You can find all of her amazing things, her productivity how-tos, classes for freelancers and business owners, all at bombshell.com, which is bombchelle.com. So thank you for joining us, Michelle.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Hopefully I have something useful to say. It'll definitely be interesting. But useful.
I'm very sure it will be useful. I've used your work before, your systems, one-on-one classes, your planners, and it's been very useful to me. So I'm sure I'm going to get something useful from it. And I'm very, very sure a lot of the listeners and watchers and readers who are going to be accepting and using this are going to find something wonderful too. So thank you. So today, guys, we are going to be talking about systems, what they mean and why they are important in freelancing and entrepreneurship business, and how that is related to health, mental health in entrepreneurship and freelancing, and how we can put all these together. Because I think, and I know you've written about this before, Michelle, that there are a lot of myths happening around entrepreneurship and mental health and bootstrapping. And I know probably a lot of this stuff comes from a good place in a lot of ways, but somehow things can get very warped and it can end up being quite damaging. If you can say a little bit about some of that.
Yeah, like I was telling you before we started the recording, I'm actually working on an article about this right now for a client. So I have like all kinds of depressing statistics on hand, and one of them is that, and I think that it's probably a factor of a couple of things, but one of them is that mental health researchers are actually saying that, at least in the US, I'm not sure how the stats compare on a global level, that we're in the middle of a suicide epidemic, that it's gone up 24%. It was steadily going downwards until 1999, and since then it's gone up 24%. So it's now the 10th leading cause of death in the US, which is higher than homicide and Parkinson's, which is like not cool. I was going to say crazy, and then I was going to say depressing, and then I was like, well, neither of those are really the best word right now.
But that is symptomatic of how we talk about such things in our society, that they're the kind of words which come to the tip of the tongue.
Yeah.
Because, I think that's just part of the problem. But yes, you were saying.
Yeah, and some of the other interesting research that I was reading shows that, and a lot of this, so the one thing that I wish there was more of, anecdotally, based on my experience, I would say that it holds true for freelancers as well. But a lot of the research around entrepreneurs and mental illness is specifically targeted at like entrepreneurs, like Silicon Valley funding type entrepreneurs, which both comes with different stressors, but it's not necessarily, I wouldn't argue that it's any less stressful than other breeds of entrepreneurship like freelancing or solopreneurship. But in a study, it was relatively small scale, but I think it was like 200 or 300 people. They found that something like 75% of the entrepreneurs there had, even if they didn't necessarily have a diagnosis, which is like a whole other topic, they had self-reported mental health concerns, like 75%. I think it might have been 74, but that's significantly higher than the general population. And something like 30% of those people had specifically struggled with like depression. And I think it's a combination of a couple of things. I think in general, the kind of people who are likely to do freelancing or entrepreneurship are perfectionists, like continually pushing for perfection, hold ourselves to very high standards. And obviously we have some streak of independence, or we wouldn't be entrepreneurs, right? Like we would be we would be much more okay working at a job, or like, you know, we wouldn't want to, if we didn't have like a strong independent streak, then we wouldn't be wanting to work for ourselves, because that's kind of like part and parcel of it. And one of the things that comes with independence is that it's hard to ask for help. And this is something that I've struggled with repeatedly, like so much. When I was suicidal a couple of years ago, like, number one, it took me way too long to realize it, because we don't talk about these things, and I just didn't have the vocabulary. And like everything, you know, like depression, it's like everything is so flat and gray. So like it's not like, I feel like the way we talk about it, and it probably is this way for some people, but I feel like the way we talk about it makes it seem like you're expecting it to be like this really dramatic revelation, like, oh my God, I want to die, I want to kill myself. And it's not, it's just like, well, I guess that this is like the only thing that makes sense right now. Like, I remember thinking like something along that, like, well, I guess this is it, you know, like, and I remember like, and it was very like matter of fact and flat. And I didn't know how to, like, number one, express what I was feeling, which is one of the reasons that we need to talk about this stuff more. But I also didn't know how to ask for help, because I'm bad at asking for help. I didn't want to ask for help. And yeah, so I think all of these in particular with like, freelancers and entrepreneurs, that it kind of like goes into sort of just like a hot mess. And I think that, you know, it affects different populations differently. So like, if, you know, like men struggle talking about their feelings, women, like if you're trying to be like a strong, independent woman and you think that that means not asking for help, then that's something. And then we also have like, you know, for women of color, there's the whole strong Black woman archetype, and like all of these kind of like toxic messes that can combine here.
And it is something that I don't think is spoken about enough. Because I think another thing with entrepreneurship is there's a lot of image involved.
Yeah.
As I suppose if you work at a job, you don't want your employer necessarily. People might fear that if the employer finds out, they might fire them, and there might be a problem, and their co-workers and everything. So, I mean, there's a whole other set of issues there. But within entrepreneurship, I think there's a lot of issues around, and this is kind of where some of the, like the wellness kind of world intersects with this, where it's like, if you're successful and you're well and you're kind of like, you're rich and you're like joyful and you're all this stuff, and if like you're kind of failing on one of those levels, then maybe, you know, what's going on or what's wrong with you. I mean, there's always has been a stigma around talking around mental health, and I believe that it is shifting, but I believe shifting is the key, and that it's something that we have to actively be a part of. And so I guess I'm feeling that, not saying that it's harder for entrepreneurs or that it's different for freelancers and therefore worse than for other people, but I guess I am not employed in a traditional job. And so, speaking from my own experience, a lot of the people that are listening and watching this are not employed in traditional jobs. And a lot of it is because they're already dealing with challenges. Health challenges, mental health challenges, physical challenges, limitations, dealing with grief, maybe limitations around caring for somebody. And so they are in entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurship can seem like this amazing alternative to a workplace which doesn't work for you. And yet, if we don't talk about the shadow side of entrepreneurship, then we lose people in it. And I mean, the world needs people. We need these people. They are good people.
I'm not quite as certain. Like I said, most of the actual data we have is around like this one particular model of entrepreneurship. But as far as freelancing goes, a lot of the freelancers that I know are freelancers specifically because of either health or mental health issues that they have, because it provides like a level of flexibility that they wouldn't get otherwise. So you have this particularly stressful environment that appears like across the board, that either people who are predisposed to have mental illness are self-selecting to be part of this population, or that this environment can bring out these traits. So and then when you have, like with freelancing, when you have people who already have like these struggles, and then they're self-selecting into this environment for totally valid reasons, like they're not, you know, this isn't meant to be like a blamey thing, then that's a factor. And I think maybe part of it, like one of the theories, and I don't know of a way that we would test this, but one of the theories that I have is that part of the reason that it gets so bad is because a lot of people still don't understand entrepreneurship or freelancing. Like, it's becoming a lot more common, but it's like people don't understand entrepreneurship or freelancing. They generally think that if you're doing that, either you're like super, super, super doing well, like either you're automatically very well off or you're automatically like dirt poor and you're choosing to be that way. That's like, in my experience, that's kind of where the two perceptions tend to fall. And then they also don't understand mental illness. So like when you add those two things that people don't understand, it creates this like extra feeling of isolation where you feel like you can't talk about it with people. And like you feel like you can't talk about anything with people. And when you do talk about it with someone, if they think, you know, they're either like, well, then why are you freelancing if it's so stressful? Or they're like, well, everything, like your business is going well, so like why are you depressed?
Why aren't you happy?
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is something that happens across the board because people don't understand like that it's a brain chemistry thing. I mean, it's not like it's not like this conscious thing where you're like, oh, my life is terrible. Like your brain is like, it's a brain chemistry issue. It's not. It's definitely not a choice. But people still don't understand that, and that's one of the big reasons that it's so important to talk about it, as far as I'm concerned. And that it's also really important to find like supportive communities, like your Facebook group, or like I have, you know, friends who are entrepreneurs or freelancers who understand it, and friends who understand like, you know, I think that it's important to, and I don't know if this sounds weird, but I think it's important to like actively seek out friends and colleagues who have experienced similar struggles as you, in much the same way that, you know, people from other marginalized communities will seek out like career colleagues or mentors who are also gay, you know, or are know what that experience is like. And I think that that's a good thing. I think that's a really positive thing to do, so that you have someone who can like get it in a way that your friend who might be very well meaning doesn't necessarily get it, you know, because that's so important, is feeling like somebody understands you and understands the struggle.
And I think that breaks so much of the isolation, and it helps you to feel heard and seen and understood and not weird or not broken or not wrong or not imagining it. And it's not
Yeah.
like you're just making it happen to yourself. And yes, I'll put the link under this, but I do run a online Facebook group, which is called the Wellness Trailblazers Cafe, and it's for people who are wanting to be well, and many people there are living with mental or physical health challenges or emotional struggles or caring responsibilities. And it's a group because a lot of the groups I found were based around people with a certain diagnosis, and so it's kind of like, I sometimes found that although I may have had a diagnosis shared with many people, I wasn't sharing the same philosophy with them. And also, what happens if you've got multiple diagnoses, as I have, or what happens if you don't have a diagnosis yet, or you don't want a diagnosis, but you know you're still having to have one or whatever. So that's kind of this thing that we have. And in terms of the really being heard and understood, I mean, it reminds me what happens, as far as I understand, in AA, where you have a sponsor as somebody who's been there and they get it, but they're, you know, a few steps further on from you, so they can kind of help guide you and help come through things. And this is where, when I work with private coaching clients and the Phoenix Fire coaching, my coaching packages, and for a lot of it, you know, I have experienced and get what people have experienced. And so there is that connection, that understanding, and that holding space there, which I do think is hugely important.
Yeah, it's super important, and I feel like it's important to sort of provide a counterbalance, because like I don't take medication, but it's like my own particular choice for, I don't know if it's like a size, metabolism issue. It could be any number of things, because all of that stuff is super, super delicate. But like birth control and hormonal birth control in general also messes me up. I have an IUD now, which is like super, super low hormones. So far, no side effects there. But like birth control, Zoloft really, really messed me up. So I don't take medication, but I think that in wellness, like especially like wellness focused entrepreneurial circles, there's often like a strong bias against medication, or like if you just do these three things, then like everything will be okay. And I think it's really important, you know, and this like, I hope that this conversation isn't just like depressing to people, but I just think it's really important to like to talk about the realness of it, because like you will be okay. Like I you know, like you will be okay. hopefully, like, you will probably be okay. I mean, and I don't even know how to say that. Like, sorry, this is not coming out the way I mean it to. But I think that in general, like being super prescriptive and being like, oh, well, if you just tried harder, then you would need to be on medication. Or like, oh, well, if you just took more walks, then you would need to do this. Or if you just exercised more, you wouldn't be depressed. And I think that there is like maybe some small, like I exercise a lot. I train. My training schedule is a little off right now because I've been having some RSI issues, but I train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu like 8 hours a week or something crazy, which is not doable, but like and that helps a lot with my anxiety and depression levels. And then I also do like yoga every day and I walk my dog and that helps a lot for me. But like assuming that everyone has the time or the financial capital to work out that much is like would be a super privileged thing to do. And so I think that it's important to create a treatment plan that works for you and not worry about what other people think. And I think that I just think that it's important that you feel like you should have permission, that if a space is not supportive in the way that you want, it's okay to leave. Like it doesn't matter if it's some big wellness guru that's telling you, that you should get off your medication, or that if you just exercise more, or that if you just tried harder, that everything would be okay. Like if that's not helping you right now, it's totally okay to walk away from that. You don't, like if you're.
But yeah, I am aware that we've kind of covered a little bit, the kind of the shadow entrepreneurship, the dark side, and how it's not all perfect, and how, you've struggled and I've struggled and lots of people have struggled and it's been tough. And so I'm wondering, you have worked on systems and on ways to manage entrepreneurship and make it as good as possible for generally to lower stress. And then especially also if you're struggling, then if you've got the systems in place, it's just so much easier.
Yeah.
One really weird example of a system, which is not a business system at all, is that when I was in hospital most recently, I, feel very empowered about my clothes often, and I really care what I wear because it helps me to feel it. Like when I was in the CT scanner, like a CAT scanner, I was looking at my feet and I was quite scared because they were, looking for stuff wrong with my brain. And I looked and I thought, yes, you may be scared, you may be in a CAT scanner, but you're wearing really, really awesome vegan motorcycle boots. So, that's pretty cool. Like, you're still you, and that really helped me. And so when I was in hospital, I suddenly realised that I was trying to ask my husband to bring in certain clothes for me, but I couldn't remember exactly what I had. And I also couldn't remember where it all was. And I also realised that he doesn't really know what, like, cotton or jersey or chiffon is. So it's just really, really hard. So now I have an app called the Style Book app, where all my clothes are on it. So if I am too ill and need him to bring me something, I just show him on the phone.
Yeah, you can definitely systematize self-care, I find. And part of that is about creating habits and kind of like figuring out how you can, like where things can fit in your day. Because I think maybe part of it is that we feel like we have to like shoehorn something in. Like we're just like, oh, I don't have the time to, I don't have the time to draw. I don't have the time to meditate because like my day is already so full. But if you like actually sit down and make a list of what you do in a day, then you'll be able to find some of the spaces. So like for me, I realized that I was like my sleep schedule had got off. This is like a relatively recent thing for me where I like fixed my morning routine again, but I realized that my sleep schedule had got off where I was like going to bed later and then not setting an alarm and sleeping until like, 9, sometimes 10 in the morning, which is like fine, no judgment if that works for you. But like what would happen is that I would wake up super late and then I would be like, oh my gosh, I need to get started immediately. So I would like start work while like eating breakfast, which is not, that's not great. That's not a good start to the day. It doesn't feel good. And it's definitely not good for like stress levels. So I just like I sort of like intentionally like did a stair step of these habits where I started setting an alarm for like 8 o'clock. And then after a week or two, after like a week, bumped it up to 7:30 and then 7. And so like I got up earlier. And when I got up earlier, I was like, okay, I am going to like eat breakfast before I get on the computer. And then it was, I am going to do yoga and eat breakfast before I get on the computer. And I have to walk the dog, but that's a given. And that's something else that you can do is kind of like a little trick is find something that you're already doing when you make a list of what you're doing in your day. to I call them anchor habits, like something that you have to do or that you're already doing regardless, and then sort of like hook another habit onto it so that you're creating like a positive chain. At one point, basically, I was only aware that I was stressed out when I was hitting like a 10, which is not great because at that point you're already. So, like, just kind of getting in the habit of checking in with yourself. And so now, like, when I'm at like a 6, I'm like, okay, I need to figure out what to do. And so that was part of what made me like redo my whole morning routine. And through like a couple of weeks of sort of the stair stepping the habits and the linking things together, like my day-to-day stress levels are noticeably lower. So that's like one way that you can systematize self-care. And then there are like so many business systems that you can do, and systems are super, super important for service-based business owners because so I would definitely recommend people start with like systematizing client intake. Like client intake is a big one. Client follow-up, just kind of having some way to be organized if you don't already, like keeping things in Asana or Trello, drop task. If you're super visual, that can work for you. There's a ton of different options. But yeah, so systems, super important.
Super important. I love what you said when I was learning systems from you, which I think was something along the lines of everything you do repeatedly in your business, it needs to be in a system.
Yes.
So what do you do over and over in your business that is not written down anywhere? There's no manual and you just remember. So like I run Healing Boxes, which is a non-profit where we make like these beautiful gift boxes full of ethical gifts for people with illness or pain or who just need some cheer in their heart. So it would be, so say we'd sell out of palm stones. These lovely glass hand-painted palm stones with positive words on them. So what happens then? Well, I was thinking, right, well then I call the supplier, and I ask them and I get the money to bank account and I pay them and then I thought, well, I know who the supplier is and I have a relationship with them and I really care about them, but is that actually written down anywhere? Is there any note of that anywhere apart from the fact that I know their name? Because that's not great.
Yeah. So like you look for the things, sort of like the rough processes. It's like you look for the stuff you do over and over again, and then you write it down. Because especially if it's something that you do like every 3 months, like even if you're not going to delegate it, if it's something that you only do like every once in a while, then what I find happens is I'm like, okay, so it's been a while since I did this, but I think I did this, and then I did this, and then I think I did this, but I'm not sure if I logged in here, or like how I ran this report or whatever. So if you write it down, then it's just a matter of like going to Google Docs and being like, I need this system for, and then you pull it up and it's like, oh, okay. So it takes, like 10 minutes instead of 45.
And I think you drop stuff less because one of the things I found is that, which is really always really stressful when you have that horrible feeling that you're not quite doing it right, but you really don't, you can't remember what it is, and some people I've had memory problems, other people have memory problems, and I know when there's press, so we have featured in press, it's fantastic. I was featured in Marie Claire magazine in the last month, or a few months ago, for Healing Boxes. I'm like, that's fantastic, it's a national magazine, that's great, right? Except it also has a lot of work after it. But what work do you have? Well, what do you want to do? I want to thank the editor. Of course I want to thank the editor and send them a card and a gift to say thank you very much. I also want to, share it with people and to put it on the website and put it on the press page and we've had copies donated and we can donate them to local hospitals so that people can not only read an empowering women's magazine that is meant to be for kind of women who are thinking as well as loving their looks, but also it has Healing Boxes in it, so that's really, really cool. But what used to happen was I'd get some press coverage and be featured somewhere and be like, that's fantastic, what do I do now? That's fantastic, what do I do now?
It works on a couple different levels. And one of the things is that once you have it written down, it's really easy to see things that can be automated, that when it's all in your head, like you don't have that like distance on it. Yeah. So it's easy to see things that can be automated. It's easy to see things that can be delegated once you're to that point in your business. But it's also like it removes that background level stress of like, am I forgetting something? Because a lot of times like you are remembering everything you need to do. But like, since you don't have something outside of your head to look at, like you don't have that extra layer of reassurance, you're just like, I think I remembered everything, but I'm not 100% sure. And it's like, it's kind of that low level anxiety when your bills like aren't organized and you're like, I think all my bills are paid. Like, are my bills all paid? Like Grace said, I do video reviews at my site. So I have like a video with a complete breakdown of how I use Asana. As like Grace said, I do video reviews at my site. So I have like a video with a complete breakdown of how I use Asana as like a freelance writer and business owner, but I also have like tons of other use cases. So you can like browse through those. But like, yeah, my top 3 or 4 would be like Asana, Trello, Drop Task, Meester Task. And between those, you should be able to find some blend of like linear and super visual that works for you. And I think all of them have free plan. I'm like 99% sure they all have free options. They also have paid options, but they do have free options, like a freelance writer and business owner. But I also have like tons of other use cases. So you can like browse through those. But like, yeah, my top 3 or 4 would be like Asana, Trello, Drop Task, Meester Task. And between those, you should be able to find some blend of like linear and super visual that works for you. And I think all of them have free plan. I'm like 99% sure they all have free options. They also have paid options, but they do have free options. Going back to the mental health thing, like when you are operating at like minimum energy levels because you're anxious or because you're depressed or whatever, like systems can make the difference between being able to get your work done for the day, like your bare minimum work done for the day in 2 hours versus like spending all day sitting at the computer with, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do next, but I feel really terrible because I know I'm forgetting something.
Yeah, or even getting it done at all, because lots of people watching this and listening to this may have low energy levels or be living with chronic illness or acute illness or a disability. They might have fatigue issues around. And so I found personally that having systems can be the difference between being able to work that day and not being able to work that day. If you could ask people watching or listening the one thing they could do to begin this shift towards healthier entrepreneurship or healthier systems now, just because I'm aware we talked about a lot of stuff, if there's just one place people might want to start, would there be one?
I would say, yeah, so I would say probably the biggest one I would probably say is try to systematize your self-care. If you're already like super big on self-care, which I know a lot of your readers or listeners probably are, if you're already super big on self-care, and if you already have like a really solid self-care routine in place, then look for like, make a list of like 1 to 3 things that you do really regularly and work on creating a system for them. Like just a list of step-by-step stuff. And then look at that list and see what you can automate. Look at If This Then That, which is ifttt.com, and look at, I'm not sure if it's Zapier or Zapier, but it's probably Zapier because they call them Zaps. But it's the same idea, but with business apps. So with If This Then That, you can set it up so that like, every time you get an email from like this one service, it automatically triggers like a task on Asana. Or I'm not sure if this then that can do that, but if it can't, then Zapier can, and that's zapier.com. So yeah, so like create a list of the 1 to 3 things that you're doing regularly, and then look at that list and see what you can automate. And if you can, then that's like something, once you have that list, if you're already delegating or if you're thinking about delegating soon, then you can like hand off a lot of that list to somebody else. And then you will suddenly have, because we're starting with the things that you're doing more often, you will find yourself with a lot more free time. So that you can then use on self-care or whatever you want.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you. So thank you so much for joining me and being part of this conversation, sharing so much of your wisdom and help. Everybody, you can find Michelle and more of her amazingness on bombshell.com, where you can also find, if you remember, her freelance planner, which I think will be very helpful towards systemizing and reducing stress if you are freelancing, entrepreneuring, or wanting to do any of those things.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.